Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth on the Tracks. Tonight is February 2nd, 2015. The show is being recorded on February 1st, 2015. We've got a lot of different things to talk to you about tonight. We want to get into a number of different things. What I'll start with tonight is the new BATFE rules for private gun manufacturers. Some of you who are regular listeners to this show will probably know that I've been talking about this, claiming that I'm going to be talking about it on my show for quite some time, and have never gotten around to it. So I'm going to change that tonight. I'm going to finally get into the topic a month later, but I'm going to start the show with it. That way we'll be sure to cover it. I'm also going to talk about John McCain and Henry Kissinger after the incident that garnered major news media, mainly because it was a trite incident that really has no bearing on any situation, really, but it's good political theater, good drama to put on Yahoo and TV and that kind of thing. So we'll talk about it, though, in light of what really is important, some of the facts surrounding both of these individuals. We're going to talk also about the move toward general war, getting closer and closer coming out of the Middle East, involving Israel, Hezbollah, and Syria. So we'll get into that. A lot of developments on that front. We'll also talk about ISIS. We have an ISIS mercenary now admitting that he got his funds from the United States, not just from Saudi Arabia, from the United States. And if we have time, we'll try to get into that, and we'll try to get into some vaccination news as well. Now, some of you may remember that I advertised on this show and on the website about a talk that was going to take place in Mullins, South Carolina. And Mullins is the town, which is actually, it's a county over from where I'm at, but it was the same venue where I did my talk on Syria, as well as I did my talk on vaccines. And it was Coffee, etc. there in Mullins, and we organized a talk called Improving Health Naturally. It was a talk given by Eileen Powell, who runs an herb store in Marion. It's in the same county as Mullins, but it's the county over from Florence. And the store is called Herbs and Things, and I would encourage you to go find Herbs and Things on Facebook. Go like the Facebook page, and just follow what she's doing there. But the talk was, it was discussing the benefits of various herbs and supplements, and the ways that people can improve their health and quality of life by taking them and avoiding the chemical concoctions of the medical world. And that event was successful. It took place on January 22nd, and we thank everybody for coming out. And we videotaped it, and hopefully the video is going to work out well enough that we can put it up on YouTube and share it. And when it does, we'll put it up on BrandonTurbeville.com, and we'll also, I think she'll be sharing that on the Herbs and Things Facebook page, which you can go and like and follow. So, that being said, for those of you who don't know who I am, I would encourage you to find my work over at BrandonTurbeville.com. You could also find my work as it comes out in real time at activistpost.com, theantimedia.org, and naturalblaze.com. These are some of the sites that I write for. Also, may have one coming out at inthelie.com as well, but definitely activistpost.com and naturalblaze.com. You can find the show here, Truth on the Tracks, every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on ucy.tv. And the show is also being rebroadcast on Saturday evenings as well. So feel free to check that out any of the times it's being broadcast. You can also go to the show's webpage, www.ucy.tv/TT for Truth on the Tracks. And you'll find the show's personal webpage with all the archives over on the left-hand side, links to my more recent articles on the left-hand side, and also a chat room on the page as well. If you want to join in the chat with like-minded people as you listen to the show, that's available as well. Now, BrandonTurbeville.com is where I got to encourage you to go in any event, because that is the website where I repost all of my articles, all of the interviews that I do, all of the YouTube videos, all of the archives of this show, all the relevant information goes up at BrandonTurbeville.com. We've got links to the radio show. We've got, again, all the things that I just mentioned posted up there on the homepage, and we've also got a tab for the books. So just click on books, and that'll take you to the bookstore. You can buy one of the books that are available there. So that's one way you can support me. Also, we've got information about me and about the website, and of course an events page for any speaking events or anything like that. So that will be kept up to date. So BrandonTurbeville.com is where you ought to be. Now, we're going to talk about the BATFE to begin with. We wanted to go ahead and get this out of the way, I suppose, because I've been talking about it for a while. It only took a few days, and this article came out on January 6th, but it only took a few days for the anti-gun American bureaucracy to start chipping away at the Second Amendment, where the Congress couldn't do it, where the President couldn't do it. They got the bureaucrats to go ahead and do it. And of course, this was despite being backed by billion-dollar foundations and non-governmental organizations. In the United States, the American people have somewhat come to resist this ridiculous anti-gun push. But we have this policy change, January 2nd, 2015, from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. That's the BATFE. And it issued a ruling regarding, quote, whether federal firearms licensees, that's FFLs, or unlicensed machine shops may engage in the business of completing or assisting in the completion of the manufacture of firearm frames or receivers for unlicensed individuals without being licensed as a manufacturer of the firearms. End quote. So the ruling was ATF ruling 2015-1, and it basically has called into question whether or not American citizens have the ability to produce their own weapons, pass them down, modify those weapons in specific capacities, in terms of whether or not this will remain a viable option for them. So now, to be clear, the BATFE is not attempting to entirely eliminate an individual's ability to manufacture their own weapons, but they are limiting that ability with their rulings. So the BATFE's firearm technology branch, or firearms technology branch, it's also called the Firearms Technology Industry Services branch. It was the policy of that branch, as it was enumerated in 2010, remains the same. All right, so the BATFE, this is the quote from the BATFE. It says, for your information, per the provisions of the GCA, an unlicensed individual may make a firearm as defined in the GCA for his own personal use, but not for sale or distribution. All right, it also says, also, based on the GCA, manufacturers' marks of identification are not required on firearms that are produced by individuals for personal use. Okay, now we had offices of a lawyer. This is the Prince Law Office here. They analyzed the policy statement, and they said, this is their quote, it says, it is completely lawful as acknowledged by the ATF for one to manufacture its own firearm, provided there is no intent to sell or distribute it. But the lawyers also looked, they asked another question in their own response and on their own blog. They asked, what about when that individual is incapable of turning a block of metal or 80% lower into a functioning firearm? Well, the ruling from the BATFE was justified on the grounds that the agency had been receiving inquiries from the public on the issue of private gun manufacture. And of course, the BATFE, whenever they want to push, this is problem, reaction, solution on a very dumbed down level. All right, what's the reason you're making a policy change? Oh, we were getting asked from the public. Although the public doesn't have a clue that the public doesn't know that they were asking about it. The public is just walking around saying, "What? We didn't ask about that. Who's asking about it?" But all they have to say is that they're getting inquiries from the public, and that provides the justification to go ahead and make these policy changes. So, given the history of the BATFE, I definitely would question whether or not these inquiries even exist. But the ruling began by explaining part of the issue, right? That some of the individuals who purchase castings or machine machined or molded or other manufactured bodies, that's what they also refer to as blanks or 80% receivers, that haven't received or haven't reached a stage of manufacture where they're classified as firearm frames or receivers under the Gun Control Act of 1968. Now, many people are not able to complete the manufacture of the gun, but particularly the fire control cavity, because of limitations with their own equipment. So they go out and they find a federal firearm licensee, an FFL, or they find a machine shop in their area that will assist them in the remaining steps of the procedure. Now, true to form, the BATFE has ruled that not only are federal firearms licensees and gunsmiths not allowed to complete the process for these owners, but private machine shops are not allowed to complete the process either. Even if the machine shop is just allowing its equipment to be used by the individual who's trying to produce the gun. So even if they're not using their staff to do it for you, they can't even take your money and allow you to use the equipment yourself. Now, let me read you. It's kind of long, but we need to. I'll get this out there, so especially most of you gun people out there will understand exactly what's being said by this ruling. So I'm just going to go through this, and we'll pick it up afterwards. This is what the BATF ruling states. Here's a quote: An FFL, that's a federal firearms licensee, or unlicensed machine shop may also desire to make this available its machinery, example, a computer numeric control or CNC machine, tools or equipment to individuals who bring in raw materials, blanks, unfinished frames or receivers, and or other firearm parts for the purpose of creating operable firearms. Under the instruction or supervision of the FFL or unlicensed machine shop, the customers would initiate and or manipulate the machinery, tools, or equipment to complete the frame or receiver or entire weapon. The FFL or unlicensed machine shop would typically charge a fee for such activity or receive some other form of compensation or benefit. This activity may occur either at a fixed premises, such as the machine shop, or a temporary location, such as the gun show or event. A business, including an association or society, may not avoid the manufacturing license, marking, and record-keeping requirements under the GCA simply by allowing individuals to initiate or manipulate a CNC machine, or to use machinery, tools, or equipment under its dominion or control to perform manufacturing processes on blanks, unfinished frames or receivers, or incomplete weapons. In these cases, the business controls access to and use of its machinery, tools, and equipment. Following manufacture, the business distributes a firearm when it returns or otherwise disposes its finished frame or receiver or complete weapon to its customer. Such individuals or entities are therefore engaged in the business of manufacturing firearms, even though unlicensed individuals may have assisted them in the manufacturing process. So, all right. That's one part of it. Let me read you the other part. It says, held any person, including any corporation or other legal entity, engaged in the business of performing machining, molding, casting, forging, printing, additive manufacturing, or other manufacturing process to create a firearm frame or receiver, or to make a frame or receiver suitable for use as part of a weapon, which will or is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive, i.e. a firearm, must be licensed as a manufacturer under the GCA, identify or mark any such firearm, and maintain required manufacturer's records. Held further, a business, including an association or society, may not avoid the manufacturing license, marking, and record-keeping requirements of the GCA by allowing persons to perform manufacturing processes on blanks or incomplete firearms, including frames or receivers, using machinery, tools, or equipment under its dominion and control where that business controls access to and use of such machinery, tools, or equipment. Held further, this ruling is limited to an interpretation of the requirements imposed on persons under the GCA and does not interpret the requirements of the National Firearms Act 26 U.S. Code 5801, and there it goes. So, now, that ruling that I just read, it's not on the level of a gun ban, and it's not banning private production and the manufacture of guns. But what it is doing is chipping away at the Second Amendment rights of American citizens, bit by bit, minuscule ruling by minuscule ruling. This is a very small change in the ruling and a small change in policy, but what it does is it chips away and it reduces a large portion of people who manufacture their own firearms. So the Prince Law Offices, and this is the lawyer's office who has taken a look at these policy changes, this is what they give as their opinion here. This is what the Prince Law Offices say on their blog, which is linked to in my article. While I can understand the rationale behind the determination where the individual is under the instruction or supervision of an unlicensed machine shop, as the machine shop or its employees would seemingly be causing the machine to perform the modifications to the 80% lower, I cannot understand or see any legal rationale where the non-licensed machine shop only makes available the equipment and does not provide any instruction or supervision. If the machine shop merely offers individuals the opportunity to utilize its equipment for either set fee or hourly rate, as a number of machine shops and vocation technical schools offer, the business or school is not involved in any distribution of the firearm, nor is it engaged in the business of manufacturing firearms, as the individual retains absolute possession and control in the manufacture of the firearm. This ridiculousness of this determination and logical outgrowth suggests that any manufacturer of drills, drill presses, drill bits, CNC machines, 3D printers, etc., is also involved in the distribution of firearms and engaged in the business of manufacturing firearms, even though they only sold a product that the end user elected to utilize in a particular way. If the machine shop only offers its equipment for rental and does not provide any supervision or guidance, it is no different than the manufacturer of the equipment being utilized. All right. So as I said, this ruling doesn't end the practice of manufacturing your own firearm, but what it does do, it puts a serious financial dent in the process, just not only for the individual who produces the firearm, but also for the companies, and there are many that produce 80% lowers. By ruling that individuals have to be able to complete the entire process with their own tools, the number of individuals who are able to do so, because most of these guys don't have the proper tools, is going to go down dramatically. And when that number goes down, the number of firearm companies that manufacture the parts and accessories, like 80% lowers, for instance, are going to go out of business. Either they're going to go out of business or they're going to have to quit carrying those parts, because they're not going to have the market available to continue to sell them. So, going back to the Prince Law Offices, they were actually, I should give them credit here, the Prince Law Offices were the ones who really broke this story. It existed on, it was released on the BATFE website, but the Prince Law Offices are the ones that actually pulled it off the website, read it, and then analyzed it, and caused other people to know that it had even been changed. So, this is what the Prince Law Offices have to say. They say, what if the individual borrows a tool from a neighbor? What if the equipment utilized is jointly owned, such as marital property? Can a company offer membership whereby any member is entitled to utilize the company equipment for free, and the member complete his or its firearm and the company equipment, since the business would not be engaged in the business? Do machine shops now need to inquire of the individual as to what he or she or it is going to be utilizing the machinery for? All right, so They give you a pretty good analysis of the ruling on the Prince Law Office's website, and they look at it from a legal standpoint, but they also give a more personal, kind of constitutional perspective on the blog as well. And we'll kind of end with that. It says, clearly there is opportunity for anyone or entity to aggrieve to challenge ATF's ruling, but will anyone from the industry step up to the plate? With a few recent exceptions, our industry, and they're talking about the gun industry here, our industry has generally declined to push back against ATF's overarching determinations. Many in the firearms industry believe that they can make a deal with the devil and not get burnt, ATF 41P anyone, or that if they make any waves, they'll be in the crosshairs of the out-of-control agency known as ATF. Unfortunately, both of these positions have led us to where we are today. We take it on the chin time after time and allow ATF to do as it wishes. Either we need to start pushing back, as some are now doing, or there won't be any industry to fight, and our industry isn't just an industry, it's the Second Amendment. Well said, Prince Law offices. So, without a doubt, my article, Prince Law offices, a couple of other people who've covered this, and by the way, I think Come and Take It Texas, which is a gun rights organization down in Texas, they actually went out and had a protest. I don't know how it turned out, but the idea was that they were going to go to the State House in Texas and manufacture a firearm on the State House grounds. So good for them for stepping up. But so there's going to be a lot of people, and I've heard it as well, who come out and they're criticizing the people who are criticizing this ruling, right? They're suggesting that this is not, this is panic. It's not a big deal. If you can afford to pay the machine shop, you ought to be able to afford the tools. But the issue here is not about whether or not you own the tools or whether there's a change in minor details or if it's a big deal or a small deal. It's basically that you have a constitutional and a natural right to own and produce guns for purposes of self-defense. That's what we should be concerned with. So, with these laws, with these policy changes, executive orders by the president, laws passed by Congress, all this stuff is bit by bit designed to just eat away at the Second Amendment, and it's got to be stopped. So the article that I've written on the subject is entitled "BATFE Ruling Creates New Hurdle to Private Gun Manufacture," and that's up at BrandonTurbeville.com and Activist Post. So go check that out. Now, I guess we should move on to the question of the possibility of war in the Middle East, and that is of utmost importance because, as I mentioned last week on the show, we had a situation where the death squads were once again being choked. All right, the Syrian army had encircled Aleppo, or largely encircled Aleppo. They're still in the process of doing that now. And once that's done, the death squads in Aleppo will be surrounded. They can be starved out. They can be driven out. They'll be cut off from other supplies, and that will spell the end of the death squad. The death squad, cabal in Aleppo for the near future. And of course, as the Syrian military was drawing closer to having surrounded Aleppo and having mopped up the death squads fighting there, the NATO directors, I guess we should say, have been calling for peace. Let's have a peace talk. It's funny how peace talks are out of the question. Assad must go unless Assad is winning to the point where it's so obvious, and the false flag attacks like the Ghouta chemical weapons attacks can't be used anymore. Then all of a sudden it's time for peace talks. This is time for a ceasefire, which means it's time for Assad. Let's do whatever we can to make Assad stop shooting so the death squads can regroup and resupply. Well, that fell apart as well as it should have. And, good luck to the Syrian army to mop up these terrorists. I'd call them animals, but that's an insult to the animals. Now, what we had recently as the mad dog of the Middle East, the settler state of Israel, continues to launch attacks on sovereign governments, able to do so not because of their own military might or certainly not because of their own moral high ground, but because everyone knows that Israel can do what it wants, and if you ever straighten up your back to Israel, the United States will come in and fight and die to the last American to protect Israel, which apparently half of the population believes is the 51st state in this country. And, especially after watching American Sniper, the sizable portion of the American population is now ready to go to war with itself if it was told that it needed to do that. But we have a situation, January 27th of this, January 27th, my article entitled, "Israel Launches Artillery Strikes into Syria, Down Syrian Jet." We had that happening. We had 2 rockets coming from the Syrian side of the border, and these rockets, it's not determined whether or not these rockets came from the Syrian military or whether they came from the death squads. It could have been that these rockets were entirely a mistake by either group. We certainly know the death squads aren't eager to attack Israel because they don't want to bite the hands that feed them. and that's well documented. If you want to go back and look at some of my older articles, listen to some of my older shows, you'll find out that that's exactly the case. It's unlikely that the Syrian military would be so stupid as to fire missiles into Israeli territory and provoke the Israelis, which have acted with impunity for the last 4 years against the Syrian government. So we have these two missiles being fired into Israeli territory, and I would say allegedly. I would add allegedly, because we don't know what is true and what's not when it comes from the settler state. I mean, after all, their own intelligence agency, its motto is by way of deception, right? So allegedly there are two rockets coming from the Syrian side of the border onto the occupied territory of the Golan Heights on late January. So there's so much you have to say here in terms of the Middle East. The Golan Heights is largely considered Israeli territory by the Western media, but the truth is Israel captured the Golan Heights in the 1967 war against Syria, and it's considered occupied territory. So we'll call it the occupied Golan. But the Israelis immediately, quote unquote, responded. Right? The Israelis launched an immediate response. They just started firing artillery into the Syrian side. So there was also suggestions. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Let me stop jumping around. There was an Israeli military spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, said that the rocket fire coming from Syria into Israel appeared to be intentional. Well, of course he would have said that, wouldn't he? So he went on Twitter. He said that Israel responded with artillery towards the positions that launched the attack. And then we had Benjamin Netanyahu saying that Israel took these rockets very serious and they would retaliate. Netanyahu went to the International Holocaust Remembrance Day to milk that for all that it was worth and insult the victims of the Holocaust by going out and using their names to perpetrate another one. He went out and said that those that play with fire will get fire. Oh, wow, isn't he prolific? Isn't he just poetic? The military said sirens had sounded in communities in the occupied Golan Heights earlier in the day. They said it was evacuated, and they closed a popular ski resort following the strike. So, of course, they'd get the people at the ski resort out, but Israel saying that somewhere had been evacuated before they pounded it with artillery. Now, we take that with a grain of salt. But we have a video posted by AFP which seems to suggest that Israel also downed a Syrian fighter jet over the Golan Heights, but that the fighter pilots had ejected to safety. Now you can watch the video that's linked to in my article, and it's not really clear, to be honest, what that was. The report was that it was a Syrian jet, but it's not really clear. The Israelis are claiming that the plane had ventured across the ceasefire line into Israeli territory, so they shot it down. Of course, that only applies to Israel. If Israel flies planes across your country and starts bombing left and right, you have no right to shoot that down because they're Israelis and they're special people. Obviously, this is not the first time that Israel attacked Syria in support of the death squads. It's not the first time they've done so in coordination with them either, but on October 30th in 2013, we had Israel attacking and completely destroying a Syrian air defense base in Snobar Jabla in Syria, which is located there, Latakia. Which is over there on the coast of the Mediterranean, sort of a port city there. The base was alleged to house a surface-to-air missile battery that Israel didn't want Syria to have, so it bombed. It's also known that Israel launched attacks against Syrian forces and military convoys at least 4 times prior to that attack on October 30th. So we've also got, in June 2014, we had Israel launching a series of airstrikes against Syrian military positions under the pretext of retaliation for a cross-border attack, which almost was certainly initiated by death squad fighters, sort of a false flag attack there. Or it could have been simply that these people are monkeys, and that this is a logistical inadequacy, and it spilled over into Israeli territory. They mistakenly thought they were killing a certain group of people, and they ended up on the other side of the border. So there's a lot of questionable circumstances surrounding that incident. We had that killing of an Israeli teenager by this anti-tank missile, allegedly, and quite frankly, I question the official Israeli story. There were a lot of Israeli teenagers who were just at the wrong place at the wrong time around that time period that was justifying a lot of military actions on the part of the Israelis. So we had, occasional attacks on Syrian territory is bad enough, but the fact is Israel has coordinated these attacks with the death squads on a number of occasions. And we had May in 2013. We had Aaron Klein reporting. He was a WABC host and a best-selling author, stating that Israel had made airstrikes in Syria, and they were closely coordinating with Turkey, which was helping coordinate the death squads to attack into Syria at the same time. Right? The sources exposing this decline were from Jordan and Egyptian intelligence agencies, and essentially what they did was they coordinated rebel attacks, and they call them rebel attacks, but this is coordinated death squad attacks throughout Syria, throughout the country of Syria, and they did so at a time to coordinate with the Israeli strikes. Right? They didn't. The death squads themselves may not have known about the Israeli strikes. In fact, they probably didn't. The sources are saying that they didn't know about these attacks to begin with, but they did occur at the same time as the Israeli bombing. So, in other words, what this was is Israel was acting as Al-Qaeda's air force. We've got December 7th, 2014. Israel launched attacks into Syria again. This time they did that close to Damascus. They did that near the Damascus International Airport. They also struck the town of Damas, which is located close to the Lebanese border. And we have numerous reports that bear that out to be true. We've also got the fact that around the same time the Israelis bombed an agricultural airport in Damas, and it bombed an import-export warehouse in Damascus. So both of these locations were under the control of the Syrian military at the time, and they involved supplies of food and other supplies greatly needed by the Syrian people. But, of course, that's the MO of Israel. So the targets of both Israeli and American airstrikes in Syria have largely targeted civilian locations. They targeted Syrian infrastructure, Syrian oil refineries, food centers, grain silos, that sort of thing. This was, those attacks also came as the death squads had launched an assault on the Syrian air base in Deir el-Zor, which was ultimately repelled. But again, that shows you more coordination. So Syrian President Bashar al-Assad went recently on television and said, how can you say that Al-Qaeda doesn't have an air force? They have the Israeli Air Force. And that's true, and I'm glad he pointed that out. But let's take a slight step back and go to around January 21st of this year. We had a situation, we had another just brazen attack on national sovereignty and human rights. Israel launched a bombing mission onto Syrian soil in defense of death squads, of course, along with the U.S. and France and the U.K. that they've been supported by. So there was another airstrike in Syria, and a lot of some people attributed the attack to missiles fired from helicopters. Others said it was jets. Others said it was drones, all Israeli, of course. And the attack took place close to the occupied Golan Heights area. This was in southern Syria. Now, there were Hezbollah and Iranian officials in Syria in that area investigating the coordination and connections between Israel and terrorist organizations operating down there on the ground. And, while Israel has launched a number of airstrikes in the past in Syria that we just documented here, most of them are against Syrian military targets or civilians. But the strikes that took place on the 21st were aimed at the Iranians and Hezbollah fighters, right? Because these guys were meeting with the Syrian military to investigate the Israeli connections to terrorists. Iran publicly confirmed the death of General Muhammad Ali al-Haddadi, and they confirmed that he was killed by an Israeli airstrike in Syria. The Israeli government, of course, wouldn't confirm the death, wouldn't confirm the airstrike operations, but there were anonymous intelligence sources coming out in the Israeli news media reporting that the strikes took place and that they were an attempt to foil a plan by Hezbollah to attack Israel, because everybody is always forming a plot to attack Israel, right? It's everything. It's always the victimhood, the victim nation of Israel. And so, in other words, the Israeli government is never going to publicly admit guilt, but what they will do, they will allow the media to go on and just report what happened while they deny. So they have plausible, not really plausible deniability, but they have deniability on the world scene. They can always say, no, we didn't do that, but while everyone knows that they did that. Now, Eyal Ben Reuven, who was a retired major general from the Israeli military, he came out and said that just the presence of a high-ranking Iranian figure alongside Hezbollah commanders means that they've been planning an operation against Israel on a high level. Of course, he didn't cite any small bit of information. He just said it, and that's all that needs to be documented, I guess, to determine that there's a planned conspiracy to overthrow the Israeli government and to kill Israelis. Well, the truth was, again, they were in the country to investigate the connections that the Israeli military has to death squads. That's what they were doing there. And that's documented as well. So, in addition to the Iranian commander al-Haddadi, we also have a number of Hezbollah fighters were being killed. We had Jihad Mughniye was also killed, and he was the son of a top Hezbollah military commander, Imad Mughniye, who was himself assassinated in Damascus in 2008, which is attributed to Israel. So it's been reported that another senior Hezbollah commander was also killed in these airstrikes. So that adds a dangerous international dimension to the situation already, because you have the ability or the possibility of this situation bubbling up over the borders of a number of different countries, right? Syria, it's already happening. Iraq, it's already happening. But now you've got an Iranian commander being killed. You've also got Lebanese fighters being killed. And, of course, you've got the Israelis right in the mix and the Palestinians who are being killed left and right, but who are still fighting. So this is what you have here, and of course the death squad's coming in from Turkey, always threatening to bubble up there as well. So this is the scene that you've got being set. And before we go into that, I'm not going to go into the Israeli connections to death squads. We've done that repeatedly here on the show. So what I'll move into now is a report on, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, January 27th, there was a report that Israel launched artillery strikes into Syria and downed a Syrian jet as a result of these two minuscule rockets that went into Israeli territory and didn't kill anybody. Well, now, people had been waiting for the response. What was going to be the response from the Iranians? What was going to be the response from Hezbollah? Israel has repeatedly attacked Syria and has received no response. The planes aren't even shot down. Well, they killed some Hezbollah fighters in Syria, and the response came relatively quickly. We had there were some Israeli military vehicles traveling along the Lebanese border, right? And it's a little it's a little unclear as to where they were at. Were they on the Israeli side? Were they on the Lebanese side? But they were. Well, excuse me. Let me take that back. What these Israeli convoys, they were traveling on the Lebanese border with Syria, okay? So they were traveling on the Lebanese border with Syria, and the Lebanese fighters ambushed this convoy. There was 9 Israeli military vehicles, and they killed 17 Israeli soldiers. In fact, they wounded 7 of the 7 more Israeli soldiers, and one was allegedly a high-ranking officer. Now that we don't know about that, but that's allegedly one of them was a high-ranking officer, and apparently an Israeli soldier was also taken prisoner during the operation. So there's your response: about 17 dead, 7 wounded, 1 captured, another may be captured, maybe a high-ranking official. So there's your Hezbollah response. And it came quick. Now, of course, we also have on January 28th, we had Hezbollah once again fired anti-tank missiles at 2 Israeli soldiers as they drove around this disputed area along the Lebanese border, and so they killed 2 more Israeli soldiers. Now, we can only say that what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? Israel, you can attack Lebanese soldiers left and right. You can attack Syrian soldiers. You can attack Iranian soldiers. You can attack Palestinians. You can attack anybody. But heretofore, you have not been facing any responses. Well, now you have been facing responses. So we got 19 dead Israeli soldiers, and we've got 7 wounded, and we've got 2 captured, possibly a top commander. So this is the response, but we all know that Israel is a mad dog. Israel is an absolute, in terms of personalities of nations, it's a lunatic, right? Because it does that because it knows it can be a bully, because an even bigger bully, the United States, is going to come and fight and die to the last American to protect their stupid aggression. So the question is, how will Israel respond to Hezbollah's response? That is the question of the day, right? Will Israel respond by airstrikes into Lebanese territory? Will Israel respond by airstrikes onto Syrian territory? Will Israel respond by engaging in a Holocaust of Palestinians? And how will they do this? You know, this is the question. Or will they just ignore it? Will they just try to downplay the situation and pretend that it didn't happen? Given Israel's history, this is not going to be the method that they take, but we can only kind of sit and wait to see. Now, if all of these countries come together in war, of course we know what the result will be. The Iraqis, the Iranians, the Syrians, the Lebanese, the Palestinians, they do hate Israel, and they have every justification for doing so. They should hate Israel. In fact, most of the people in the Middle East do hate Israel, and it's not because they hate Jews, it's because they hate Israel. It's because Israel is it's a non-country. It's a settler state. It's the new Jewish Ulster, as Sir Ronald Storrs put it in his own book. Because what it's designed to do is to act as a stick at the hornet's nest in the Middle East. It is the single most disruptive force in the Middle East. It's Israel. It's not Iran. It's not Syria. It's not Iraq. It's not even Saudi Arabia. It's Israel. It's the core of what keeps these tensions going. And of course, if you the whole country essentially was stolen from the people who lived there and continue to live there. There's still people alive who had their land, who personally had their land stolen, and I interviewed one of them here on this show. And it's not lost on the people in the region. It's not lost. The West, particularly the United States and Britain, are the major supporters to this disgusting settler state. So we could talk about the solutions to that problem later on, and we've talked about them here on this show, but we're not going to get into them tonight. The point being that if the Middle East erupts in conflagration here, the United States will come to the aid of Israel. Don't ever believe that they won't, because you're going to have virtually the entire Middle East who is going to be ready to fight and overtake Israel, and the United States will never let that happen, no matter how much they deserve it. They will not let that happen. So that's going to pull the United States in, and the United States, of course, once they become the United States and the West become involved in the Middle East in some massive type of occupation, then one can only wonder what the Russian response will be. And I'll leave that up to the listeners. We're not going to speculate any more tonight, but let's just say that the possibility for general war is increasing by the day right now in the Middle East, and we hope it doesn't come to that. We hope it simmers down a bit, but there's at this point no evidence that it will. Now, we've got to mention briefly a good article by Tony Cartalucci, ISIS mercenary admits getting funds from U.S. over at Land Destroyer Report. Tony does a lot of good work over there. He's the one that really analyzed this story the best. I haven't covered the story, but we'll talk about it briefly. We have an article coming from the Express Tribune, which is an affiliate of the New York Times, and it's entitled "Startling Revelations: Islamic State Operative Confesses to Getting Funds Via the United States." Well, it's astonishing for people who read the Express Tribune, but not maybe astonishing for people who read Activist Post or Land Destroyer Report, because you would know that that's exactly where ISIS gets its funds, is from the United States and from Saudi Arabia and from places in the West as well, France, UK, etc. So they it's another big news story, though, for the mainstream. Oh my God, ISIS is receiving funds from the U.S. Oh my God. So we have an investigation coming from Pakistani security services. They captured an Islamic State fighter, or an ISIS fighter, and he revealed that he and other fighters alongside of him receive funds that come through the United States. And this is what the report says. It says, during the investigations, Yusuf al-Salafi revealed that he was getting funding routed through America to run the organization in Pakistan and recruit young people to fight in Syria. A source privy to the investigations revealed to Daily Express on the condition of anonymity. Al-Salafi is a Pakistani Syrian who entered Pakistan through Turkey 5 months ago. Earlier, it was reported that he crossed into Turkey from Syria and was caught there. However, he managed to escape from Turkey and reach Pakistan to establish the Islamic State in the region. All this international intrigue. Just how on earth do they do it? Couldn't put a tube of toothpaste on an airplane if you're an American citizen, but these monkeys can figure out how to get around the entire globe, in and out of war zones, back out the same way that they came in, back to Europe, out of Europe, back to Pakistan, and over to Syria, and then to Turkey. They can figure out how to do it. The guys couldn't manage a fast food restaurant. They couldn't work at a fast food restaurant, but they can coordinate all this travel. They got all this money. Has anybody ever flown? You know how much this stuff costs? They got all this money. They fly around the world. Where do they get that? The Tribune also revealed that the findings of the investigations were being shared with the United States. Well, I'm sure the United States will act on it appropriately. The source that the Tribune cited suggested a compelling theory as to why the United States has attempted to portray itself as at war with ISIS, stating, quote, "The U.S. has been condemning the Islamic State activities, but unfortunately has not been able to stop funding of these organizations, which is being routed through the U.S. The U.S. has to dispel the impression that it is financing the group for its own interests, and that is why it launched offensive against the organization in Iraq, but not in Syria," he added. All right, so this is the source. I'll read that again. The United States had to dispel the impression that it is financing the group for its own interests, and that is why it launched offensives against the organization in Iraq, but not in Syria. It's a telling report. So That story also has a number of other revelations, I'll put in quotes, regarding the operations in Syria, the ISIS operations in Syria. This is Tony Carlucci. He wrote that Salafi's ability to enter Syria effortlessly through NATO member Turkey, then escape back to Pakistan again via Turkey. All of that shows that it's ISIS is not headquartered in their captured Syrian oil fields, or their funding doesn't come from ransom money taken for hostages, but it comes from fighters and arms and equipment and money coming from NATO territory in Turkey. So, of course, what's funny, the United States is claiming that it's at war with ISIS, and now it's going, it's unilaterally bombing Syrian territory. It's claiming that it has to train more rebels, more vetted rebels, which means ISIS, so they can topple the Syrian government. But they just can't figure out how to shut Twitter accounts down. They can't figure out how to stop the cash. The U.S. government can monitor every single transaction, not just financial, every single transaction of anything in the country in real time, and save it for years, for eternity. And it's cheap. Yet they can't figure out who's funding ISIS. Oh God, here, let's move on to this other part. We're running out of time here, so I want to go ahead and get this in. The likelihood that the United States was unaware that these funds that are the ones that were routed through the U.S. It's almost an impossibility, right? If you look at, here's an article we have from Der Spiegel. This is called "Follow the Money. NSA Monitors Financial World." And this is what it says. In the summer of 2010, a Middle Eastern businessman wanted to transfer a large sum of money from one country in the region to another. He wanted to send at least $50,000, and he had a very clear idea of how it should be done. The transaction could not be conducted via the United States, and the name of his bank would have to be kept secret. Those were his conditions. Though the transfer was carried out precisely according to his instructions, it did not go unobserved. The transaction is listed in classified documents compiled by the U.S. intelligence agency NSA that Spiegel has seen, and that deal with the activities of the United States in the international financial sector. The documents show how comprehensively and effectively the intelligence agency can track global flows of money and store the information in a powerful database developed for this purpose. The obstacle. All right, we'll stop there. So it's clear that the United States does, in fact, know exactly where different types of funding for terrorism is coming from. But instead, they try to feign that they don't. Last thing I'll try to get in before the end of the show, we had John McCain defending Henry Kissinger recently. We had Henry Kissinger, I think he's in his 90s, he might be 91 years old, going to address the Senate Armed Services Committee yet again. And he arrives there, and there are Code Pink protesters who are attempting to start listing the crimes against humanity of Henry Kissinger, but they didn't have the number of years it would take for them to get through the list, so the Capitol Police escorted them out. And John McCain, he's always a friend to anybody who's ever committed a war crime or doing their best to commit a war crime or an atrocity on a mass scale. He just typically erupted in his psychopathic anger at someone who is trying to stand up to stop people from being killed. He says, you're going to have to shut up or I'm going to have you arrested. And he screamed, "Get out of here, you low-life scum," and all that. He went on to apologize to Kissinger, and this is what McCain says. He says, "Dr. Kissinger, I hope on behalf of all the members of this committee on both sides of the aisle, in fact, from all of my colleagues, I'd like to apologize for allowing such disgraceful behavior towards a man who served his country with the greatest distinction. I apologize profusely." So it's funny. A lot of Americans might remember the same kind of display, disgraceful behavior towards a man who served his country with the greatest distinction in the Congress, because especially Vietnam veterans might remember this, because that was John McCain when he stood on Capitol Hill and he argued against any further investigation or revelation of whether or not American POWs were still being held in Vietnam. He also, his incessant grandstanding in support of Al-Qaeda and ISIS that he calls moderate rebels should also not be forgotten. McCain has supported the Vietnam War. He supported the Libyan War. He supported the Iraq War. He supported the Vietnam War, virtually every war that's ever been waged on the face of the earth and that ever will be waged upon the face of the earth. John McCain is a vocal spokesman for it. And, of course, Kissinger, I guess he would look up to Kissinger. This is the guy who helped initiate the Chilean coup, the Vietnam War, the Cambodian and Laotian wars, one of the authors of the National Security Study Memorandum 200, all this stuff. So I guess birds of a feather flock together. And we'll have more on Mr. McCain coming next week, or at least in terms of articles. We'll get around to that. But Mr. McCain needs to answer for some other things, not just his support of ISIS or Al-Qaeda, but for some things that may have been outside of the mainstream purview for many years. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next week with more of this information. Stay with us. This has been Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. We'll see you next week.
The Anti-Media Radio, your host Nick Burnby here on UCY.tv.
Truth on the Tracks you can catch every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on UCY.tv.